Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove and I am back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. So I have been dealing with this fly in my office for the past hour, driving me insane. I can't catch it. All right. Anyway, let's get started with this week's No Filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, I saw your IG reel about meal prepping and wanted to know what's the difference between motivation and discipline, as you had mentioned that discipline is more important. Yeah, when it comes to doing mundane tasks like meal prepping, discipline always takes precedence over motivation. Motivation is important, but let's be honest, none of us are motivated 24 hours a day. Okay. So if you're waiting for motivation to kick in for you to prepare all your meals, you could be waiting a very long time. Because let's say you use up that motivation to go to the gym and then use up that motivation to get your workday done. And then you come home at the end of the workday, you're tired. The last thing you want to do is prepare all your meals for the week, right? So that's where discipline comes into play. And whenever someone's starting off on a nutritional plan with me, I always remind them, I'm like, look, this is not going to be easy. And it's not the diet that you have to be concerned about. It's more you getting into a routine, building good habits, okay? Becoming more disciplined. That's going to be the challenge. Okay. The diet's easy. Okay. But preparing all your meals ahead of time, measuring out your meals, weighing out your meals, this all requires discipline. Okay. So even for the people who are the most self-motivated, without discipline, they themselves are going to fail on these tasks, completing these tasks. So when it comes to meal prepping, my recommendation for beginners is to set aside 1 or 2 days a week where you can actually prepare your meals. And if you know you're someone who, by the end of the day, you're tired, you just all you want to do when you go home is just lay down and watch some TV or just relax, then don't schedule your meal prepping for the end of the day. Maybe put your meal prepping on a Sunday where you have the day off and do it first thing in the morning as soon as you get out of bed. And you make it a non-negotiable, which means that you've set that side of time in your schedule. You block out 2 hours of your week to prepare all your food. Okay. I've got some clients that like to prepare their meals ahead of time for 3 or 4 days. So they'll do their meal prepping twice a week. And again, my recommendation to those people are to pick days where you're not as busy with your work life or maybe even your gym. Maybe it's a day off from the gym. Okay. So instead of going to the gym, you can do your meal prepping, right? If it takes you an hour, hour and a half to go to the gym, shower, clean up, get back home, dedicate that hour and a half, 2 hours to meal prepping. Okay. Because that'll be your day off from the gym. Once you turn it into a habit, though, it becomes easier to remain disciplined. So for me, for example, I could prepare my meals on a Wednesday, on a Thursday. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is to me. It doesn't matter how busy I am. It doesn't matter how slow I am. I just look in my fridge and go, oh, you know what? I'm down to 3 meals. I need to prepare another 30 meals. And I just do it. It's because I'm very self-disciplined. I'm like, okay, I need to make sure these meals are prepared ahead of time because I don't want to be coming home after a long day of work and my fridge is empty and no food is made because now I'm hungry. And the last thing I want to do is prepare a meal when I'm hungry. Because if I'm preparing food while I'm hungry, what am I going to do? I'm going to snack on other foods. Okay. Or once my meal is prepared, I'm going to overeat. So I always want to make sure that I'm prepared. And that requires discipline. So motivation is important, but when it comes to doing these mundane tasks like preparing your meals, cleaning your house, doing groceries, this all requires discipline. Okay. And it's not easy to create a habit, a good habit that requires discipline. And that's why I tell people you have to prepare yourself and again, manage your expectations. So if you're someone who is just starting off on meal prepping, don't get caught up on all the minute details. Just focus on, okay, this week I need to get in, let's say if I'm preparing doing 5 meals a week or 5 meals a day, okay, and I'm doing 6 days of meal prep. And one day I'm just gonna, be a little bit more relaxed on my diet. That's 30 meals. If I can prepare at least 25 of those meals and get them in, measure them out, weigh them out, make sure that they're all set up in Tupperware in my fridge, I'm good. And build off that, okay? And maybe you don't get all those meals. Maybe some of them went bad because you skipped them, you didn't eat them, you ordered from Uber Eats, whatever. But as long as you're getting better week to week and you're progressing, you're going to create that habit and it's going to be easier to remain disciplined. And that's if anything in life. And I personally, for myself, I find that I'm a fairly self-disciplined individual, and I attribute a lot of that to bodybuilding. And it's really helped me when it comes to practicing proper portion control with my diet, making sure that I stay regiment in the gym with my training, and I create non-negotiables with either. So no, I have to get my workout in today. It's a non-negotiable. No, I have to make sure I get all my meals in today. It's a non-negotiable. So that discipline takes time to build, but once you have it, it's very difficult to lose it. All right. Next question. Nick, how do you recommend bouncing back from a bad week of eating and non-existent training? Well, you can't dwell on it. Okay. You have to move forward. You have to look forward. Okay. You can't stay in the past. So whatever happened last week, you got to forget about it and you got to move on. Okay. So whenever I tell clients who've been away for a week or two from the gym or they've missed a few workouts, I say, look, that was in the past. Now we've got to focus on the present and we got to focus on the future. How are we going to get you from point A to point B? Okay. We can't have another relapse, but we can't focus on that relapse. We have to move forward. So, what I recommend to people is check your mind when you come into the door, that gym, and say, you know what, this is a new week. It's a fresh start. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to approach this workout to the best of my ability. I'm going to get in every single set, every single rep. I'm not going to be on my phone. I'm going to go as hard as I can. I'm going to get out and I'm going to rest, recover. I'm going to hydrate. I'm going to make sure I fuel my body properly with the proper nutrients and keep moving forward. Okay. Don't get caught up on, oh, well, last week was a complete write-off. And so this week, yeah, I'm not going to push that hard because, what's the point? Or I've seen people do this. I've seen people talk themselves out of workouts because they shit the bed the week prior. And like, yeah, maybe I'll just take another week off. Or maybe I'll take a whole season off. Oh, it's summer now. I'm going to not go to the gym. It's okay. I'll get activity outside. I've never seen anyone get activity outside. The people who say, well, I'm not going to go to the gym in the summer because I'll be outside, I'll be moving. I'm like, it's not the same thing. Yes, you're going to be walking. You should be walking anyway. Will you go for the occasional bike ride? Maybe. Will you play the occasional game of maybe beach volleyball? Possibly. But you're not training regularly. You're not going to the gym. You're not squatting. You're not deadlifting. You're not bench pressing. So the two are not comparable. Okay. So you want to make sure that if you've had some time off from the gym, that you don't dwell on it, but also don't fall down that rabbit hole of going, well, I missed 1 week. I might as well miss 2 weeks. I might as well miss 1 month. I'm going to take 3 months off. I'm going to enjoy the summer, blah, blah, blah. I've heard it all before. Because the longer you take off from the gym, the harder it is to come back. Okay. The longer you take off from your diet, the harder it is to get back on your diet. So rather than dwell on that 1 week, which really is nothing, it's 1 week. Get back on track, okay? Turn your training into a non-negotiable, okay? Turn your diet into a non-negotiable. No, I'm not going to eat out this week because last week I didn't eat the best. I'm not going to dwell on last week. I'm not going to beat myself up on it, but I did it last week, so I don't need to do it this week. Okay. Yeah, I missed all my workouts last week. Again, I'm not going to dwell on it, but I've got energy now. I took some time off from the gym. I feel great. Let's go. I'm trying to time to start training again. Okay. So turn them into non-negotiables. Okay. And again, don't dwell on the past. Focus on the present and focus on the future. All right. Uh, Nick, what's the best way to build a new habit? I'm trying to get more consistent with going to the gym and preparing all of my meals at home. Okay, so again, this kind of correlates with the last question, right? So, there's a saying and it says it takes 21 days to develop a habit. Okay, I'm talking a good habit here. I'm not talking about a drug habit. I'm talking about a good habit. So 21 days to develop a habit. And I truly believe that because I've talked about this in the past with clients. I said, if you can just focus on getting yourself to the gym and working with myself or one of the trainers, that's a win. Now, if you can do that for a week, that's great. If you can do that for 2 weeks, even better. If you make it to that 3 week mark, something's going to feel like it's missing when you go to that fourth week and you're not in the gym. It will, because now it's become a habit. So I truly believe in that whole 21 days to develop a habit philosophy because I've seen it and I've used it myself. So it's the same thing with your diet. Okay. The first week, I have a new client who's working with me online right now for a nutritional plan, has never weighed his meals, has never practiced proper portion control ever. This is a complete 180 for this person. So I pre-warned this person to let them know that, hey, you know what? This week, all I want you to focus on is eating the foods that are on your plan. Don't even worry about measuring. Don't even worry about scaling. Just get the foods in that are on your plan. I give options on each meal. Just get those foods in. Okay. If you have a little bit extra, great. If you don't eat as much, no problem. Just get those meals in. Then we can start working on the smaller details, the weighing your meats, the measuring out your carbohydrates, right? Preparing your meals ahead of time. Okay. Because you have to remember that small changes turn into big changes. So if you go in there and say, oh my God, now I got to weigh my food, I got to portion my food, I got to pre-make all my food, oh, you're going to get overwhelmed and you're setting yourself up for failure. So I have a systematic approach that I use with every single new client when it comes to following a nutritional plan, and that's one step at a time. Okay. I put 5 meals on your plan. You were able to get 3 of those meals in each day and you ate one meal out of Chipotle's. Great. That was your first week on the plan. You got 70% of your meals in. That's excellent. Let's move on. Let's try to get now 80% of your meals in. Following week, why don't we try skipping Chipotle's? So small changes turn into big changes. And the same thing with the gym. It's whenever I get a new client, same thing. I say, I know you want to be in here 5 days a week, and I'd love to take your money, but I'm telling you right now, you're setting yourself up for failure. You're someone who has never been to the gym, or maybe you've taken the last year off from training. Do not come in here thinking that I'm going to train 5 days a week and everything's going to go great. Chances are it's not going to go as great as you think. You're going to be sore. You're going to feel run down. You're going to become unmotivated. So let's start you off smaller. Let's get you in twice a week right now, just twice a week. That's your goal. Build up to 3 times a week, 4 times a week, and so on. Okay. So small changes turn into big changes, and that's how you turn bad habits into good habits. So a bad habit would be skipping your workouts. Well, how do you turn that into a good habit? Well, you got to start going to your workouts, but you don't have to start going to every workout. You can start going to maybe 3 of your 5 scheduled workouts. Okay. Build off that. And then you'll see that as you continue along, and as I mentioned earlier, if you're doing that on a weekly basis and it turns into, a monthly basis, as soon as you stop doing one of these activities, let's say it's going to the gym or eating cleanly, you're going to feel something missing and you're going to want to return to that habit that you've built. Okay. So you have to be patient and you have to be disciplined. That's the best way to develop good habits. All right. Okay. Nick, how do you avoid injury while lifting weights? I'm a bit concerned I'm going to injure myself as I'm lifting heavier now than ever before. Good question. So, one of the ways that I've been able to avoid injuries my entire career, I had the hernia, but that hernia was not related to the gym. That I actually got the hernia outside of the gym. So, how I've been able to pretty much maintain an injury-free physique for the last 20 plus years is because I always approach each workout methodically and I always train intelligently. So I listen to my body. Every set I do, I feel the muscles. If I'm not feeling the muscles engaging properly because the weight's too heavy, I take the weight down. I don't just think to myself, no, I'm going to put more weight on the bar. I'm like, no, I'm going to take weight off the bar because I'm not doing the exercise properly. Now, if you're someone who's not as well versed in the gym and you don't have that strong mind to muscle connection, how do you know? Am I going to injure myself? I don't know if I'm practicing proper form. I don't know if my technique is on. Well, in your case, you should be working with a professional, knowledgeable, reputable personal trainer. Okay. But for everyone, regardless if you're working with a trainer or on your own, my recommendation is every new exercise you do in a workout, you pick a weight that you could easily do 25, 30 reps with. I don't want you to do 25 or 30 reps, but I want you to choose a weight that you could easily do 25 to 30 reps with on every single new exercise that you do in a workout. So for example, if you're doing a chest workout and you start off with an incline barbell bench press, that first warm-up set, should be a weight that you could do 25 to 30 reps with. And then you start to increase your weight, decrease your reps, pyramiding, right? Your next exercise, let's say it's a flat dumbbell bench press. Your first set of that exercise, I still want you to go light, a weight that you could easily do 25 to 30 reps with. Now you might be thinking, well, why? I'm warmed up now. I just did 4 or 5 sets on the incline barbell bench press, but you haven't done anything on the flat bench press yet. Okay. So you need to warm up different areas, different angles, different planes and ranges of motion for those muscle bellies. If you do this, the chances of you injuring yourself are minimal to none. Okay. Where I see most people get injured in the gym is when they're going too heavy or they're not warmed up enough. And if you're not warmed up enough and there's not enough synovial fluid flowing through your joints, flowing through your tendons, flowing through your ligaments, you're going to get injured. Okay. It's going to happen. It's an accident waiting to happen. So you have to listen to your body and you have to warm up sufficiently. Okay. And if you do this, I'm not going to say you're never going to get injured because, accidents do happen. You could warm up perfectly and you could be doing everything right. And then for some reason you're bench pressing and the bench collapses. Well, chances are you might get injured. So, you can avoid every single potential accident that can happen in a gym, but you're putting yourself in the best position to avoid injury. Okay. So make sure that you warm up sufficiently on every single new exercise you do in the gym. Okay. Listen to your body. I cannot stress this enough. There are so many times I see people in the gym, they are not paying attention to what they're doing. They're not engaged in the set. Their mind is somewhere else. Every set in between rest periods, they're on their phone. And I've always talked about how, in my opinion, phones are a distraction because after each set, you should be thinking, okay, can I go heavier? Should I back off the weight? Is this exercise working for me today? Because sometimes it's not. There have been times where I do a leg workout and I start off with squats and I'm like, this doesn't feel right today. Something's off, whether it's my back, my hips. So I either take the exercise out, put something else in as a replacement, or I save the exercise for the end of the workout once I'm warmed up. Okay. So you have to really pay attention to your body. You have to be in tune with your muscles and you have to make sure that you're warmed up. In my opinion, that's the best way to avoid injury, especially as you start increasing the poundage that you're lifting in the gym. All right. Nick, what app do you recommend using to track progress? I don't use apps. Never use them. Don't like them. Won't ever use them. However, how I track progress with my clients is I go by how they look, I go by how they feel, I go by how if their strength is increasing in the gym. That's how I track their progress. I don't need an app to tell me how many calories they're burning. I don't need an app to tell me how well they're sleeping. I use the mirror. I use my trained eye. I look at them. Oh, you're not losing enough body fat. Well, let's tweak your diet. Oh, you're not building enough muscle. Let's revise your training program. So it's just, to me, it's going back to the basics. You don't need to overcomplicate things. I know people like to track progress with all these fancy apps. I get it. I've got clients that like to know how many calories they're burning during a workout. For me, I've always been like, why? What is this data giving you? And trust me, I'm a big data guy. I am. I'm a big science guy. But what is that data giving you? How many calories you're burning? How many steps you take in a day? Right? That to me, it's like if it holds you accountable, by all means, use it. But to me, that type of data doesn't offer any benefits. The type of data that I look for is, again, I go by how someone is feeling, not just in the gym, but outside the gym. Hey, how are you sleeping? How are your energy levels? Is your strength going up in the gym or is it going down? How's your libido? Right? Are you putting on body fat? Are you taking off body fat? Is your weight going down on the scale, but your strength is going up in the gym? So these are all metrics that I use to track progress. And a lot of people out there might think I'm a little bit old school with that approach, and that's fine. But there's nothing wrong, in my opinion, with old school. Old school works. And I've always been under the belief that the more simple you keep things, the easier it is to make changes once you hit a plateau. Because if you start to overcomplicate shit, it becomes very difficult to make changes when you do hit that plateau. And that's why when I'm working with people, whether it's on their training program or nutritional plan or a combination of the two, I know exactly where to make changes. Oh, your weight loss has stalled. Well, I just have to look back at the diet, what I'm doing with your diet. Oh, maybe your carbs are too high. Let's drop your carbs. Or actually, your carbs are pretty low, but I only have you doing maybe 10 minutes of cardio. Let's bump your cardio up. So they're very simplistic changes, but as soon as we start doing that, everything starts rolling again. The person starts losing weight, or if their goal is to gain muscle, they start gaining muscle again. So I don't use apps. I'm not against apps. I just feel that they don't really offer much benefit. Again, if they hold you accountable, great. I don't need to know how many steps I take in a day. I definitely don't need to know how many calories I burn in a day because at the end of the day, I just need to look in the mirror and go, "Oh, you know what? I'm getting a little fat here. I need to either increase my intensity in the gym or decrease my calories outside the gym." It's not complicated. Okay. But again, people try to overcomplicate things. And I think a big reason for that is because people try to make money. They want to make money off their apps. Of course, you got to use my apps because you're going to see how well you're sleeping throughout the day. You got to use my apps because you're going to see how many calories you're burning throughout your workouts. You got to use my apps because you're going to see how many steps you're taking a day. And again, if all this stuff is holding you accountable, use them. But if you're like me and you go by what really matters, by how you feel internally and how you look externally, that's how you're going to track progress. Okay. Nick, how long should I be resting in between sets? Yeah, so that's another good question. Okay, so I don't time rest periods. I've never been someone that tells a client no longer than 45 seconds to a minute in between sets. What I tell people is I want you to go on your next set when you're about 70% recovered. Now, only you know that. You know internally how you're feeling. Some people take a little longer than others to recover. That's fine. Because if you're going when you're 70% recovered, you're going to recruit more muscle fibers. You don't want to go when you're 100% recovered because all you're going to do is you're going to become stagnant. You're not recruiting more muscle fibers. You're not putting a challenge on your muscles. You're lifting and you're fully recovered and you're lifting again. Okay. In my experience, that's not a great way to build solid, lean, dense muscle because you're not challenging the muscle. You might improve your strength a little bit, but you're not challenging the muscles. You're not going to really build that foundation. You're not going to sculpt those muscle bellies. So you want to make sure you're going when you're somewhat recovered, but not fully recovered. Okay. So same thing is you don't want to go when you're 10% recovered because then you risk injury. Your form's going to be off. Your technique's going to be off. So even though I don't time rest periods and I don't tell people it has to be 45 seconds to a minute, the general rule of thumb for most people, again, depending if you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, is anywhere from that 45-second to 90-second mark. Okay. But I wouldn't recommend using a stopwatch or anything like that. What I would recommend doing is keeping your phone on the sideline because that can easily become a distraction. And I know I talked about this so many times, so I won't butcher it. But if that phone comes out in the middle of a set, that 45-second rest period will easily turn into 2, 3, 5 minutes. Now you're fully recovered. Okay. Also, not to mention, your workouts are going to take you twice as long because half the workout is spent on your phone. Okay. So, my recommendation is don't time your rest periods. Go when you're about 70% recovered. What I typically do in between sets is I'll take a swig of water, even if I'm not thirsty. And the reason I do that is I want to keep the muscles hydrated. I'm not chugging the water. I just take a swig and back into my next set. Okay. I couldn't tell you how long I rest between sets, but I can tell you that I always go when I'm about 70% recovered. And again, it'll depend on how you're feeling that day. If you're feeling really good, you might recover within 30 seconds. But if you're feeling like, oh, I didn't sleep very well last night, or I'm training a really big muscle group today, it's a leg workout, you might need a little longer. That's okay. Listen to your body. But general rule of thumb, I like to use with my clients 70% recovery rate. This seems to work for most people. Okay. A few more questions. Nick, I've been training for 3 months and I'm not losing any weight. I do 30 minutes of cardio 6 times a week and lift weights for 20, 30 minutes twice a week. Should I get my thyroid checked to see if I have any issues with it? In my experience, very few people that I've worked with over the years, especially men, more common with women, but have issues with their thyroid. I mean, there are a few people out there who do have issues with their thyroid. Absolutely. There's people who have inactive thyroids. There's people who've had their thyroids removed. In these cases, those people will go on something like Synthroid. Okay. But in most cases, when I work with someone who tells me they can't lose weight no matter what they do, the first thing I ask to see is their diet. Okay. Before anything else. Because 9 times out of 10, it's what they're doing outside of the gym, outside of their cardiovascular routine. Whether they're having too much sugar, too much carbs, too much calories. This is usually the reason why most people are not losing weight. It's diet related. When you combine that with a fairly sedentary lifestyle, now you're asking for problems. In your case, you're doing 30 minutes of cardio 6 times a week. How intense is that cardio session? Are you just walking on a treadmill? Are you doing interval training, right? Because that will make a big difference. You're training twice a week, 20, 30 minutes a workout. Personally, I would increase that to at least 45, 60 minutes, 2 to 3 times a week. But again, how intense are those workouts? Because it's not necessarily the duration, it's what you're doing in those workouts. So it's very difficult for me to answer this question because I don't work with you. So I don't know what your training program looks like, and I don't really know what your nutritional plan looks like. Just by you telling me I do cardio 6 times a week and I train with weights twice a week, that could mean anything. Again, that could be that you're doing a slow walk on the treadmill, and that could mean that you're doing maybe 5 or 6 sets in 20, 30 minutes, which in my opinion would not be enough. Okay. So again, my recommendation, get your thyroid checked if you're concerned, because you could have a thyroid issue. I mean, you could have an inactive thyroid for sure. That does happen. But in my experience, working with the general population, very I would say probably like less than 10% of the time, I've worked with someone who actually has had a thyroid condition. And it's usually women. I don't think I've ever worked with a single guy on my roster who's ever had a thyroid condition, but I have worked with a few women over the years who have developed thyroid conditions, especially in their late 20s, going into their early 30s. It's usually genetic related. So whether it was a mom or dad, someone grandmother who had an inactive thyroid, and it's passed down to them hereditary. Okay. So it's usually a genetic factor. But if you do believe that it could be an issue, by all means get it checked. But I would be looking first at the nutritional plan and what you're doing in the gym, not the duration of your cardio sessions or the duration of your resistance training workouts, but what you're doing during those cardiovascular sessions and resistance training workouts. Okay. Again, if you're not sure of what you're doing, my recommendation, hire a reputable, knowledgeable, and experienced trainer slash coach that can help you. Okay, that can help you troubleshoot these problems. And I promise you, this is very common. There's a lot of people that they think they're doing everything right, but they're not. And that's okay. This is not your field of choice. If you're a lawyer, why would you know anything about dietary nutrition and training science, right? So work with someone who does and can help troubleshoot and help you skip through all this trial and error. Okay. But again, I'm not telling you not to get your thyroid checked. If you think your thyroid is inactive or you're having some issues, by all means get checked. But usually there's other symptoms with that, right? One being chronic fatigue. If you have a thyroid issue, you're going to notice chronic fatigue throughout the day. Absolutely. Okay. So, but also if you're having chronic fatigue, that could also be an iron deficiency. So there's all these things that it could be, but in my experience, it's most likely related to your diet and potentially what you're doing during those cardiovascular sessions and resistance training workouts. Okay. Nick, how do you make sure that your clients who are bulking don't add on any body fat during their diet? Okay, so for my clients are trying to gain weight, what I'll typically do with them is I'll put them in somewhat of a caloric surplus, but I'll monitor their weight on a weekly basis. So clients who work with me online, they send me their check-ins. My Canadian clients send me their check-ins on Tuesdays and Fridays. My American clients send me their check-ins on Mondays and Thursdays. During those check-ins, they have to send me their fasted weight. Okay. So I monitor if their weight's going up or the weight's going down. I also monitor how quickly their weight's going up or how slowly their weight's going down. Okay. So this is important because if I'm working with someone who's trying to put on muscle, but they're adding on 4 or 5 pounds a week, well, unless they're on anabolic steroids, which most of my clients are not, that's telling me that they're putting on a combination of muscle, fat, and water, which I don't want. My goal is to just put on purely muscle, maybe a little bit of water as well, but purely muscle, no body fat. So in order for me to do this, I have to make sure that number one, all, not some, all of their macronutrients, all their calories are coming from high quality sources. Okay, so their micronutrients are in check, the quality of their foods. That means lean proteins, complex carbs, healthy fats. I don't put trans fats in anyone's nutritional plans. Yes, I put some saturated fats. I don't put simple carbohydrates in anyone's nutritional plans, nor do I put processed fatty protein sources in people's nutritional plans. Okay. So whether someone's working with me to gain weight or lose weight, all the foods I put on my nutritional plans are what I call clean foods. Okay. They're good for you foods. Their micronutrient value is incredibly high. Okay. So no processed foods, no foods that are full of corn syrup and starch and simple sugars. Okay. None of that crap. They want to have that for a cheat meal, have it, but it's not something they have on a regular basis. And you also have to make sure you know the type of metabolism you're working with. So whenever I work with a new client, if it's someone, one of the questions I ask them is, what were you like as a kid, teenager? Have you been someone who struggled with weight your whole life? Do you put on body fat quite easily? Okay. In that case, you're what we call an endomorph. Now, if I'm working with someone who's an endomorph, I don't have to really give them that much calories to help them gain muscle. They'll respond pretty good, actually, to just a slightly higher than caloric maintenance plan. Whereas if I'm working with someone who's been skinny their whole life and struggles to put on weight, known as an ectomorph, well, that person I have to give lots of food to, lots of calories to. But even those people, I don't give them a cheat meal every day. I don't tell them to go have a burger and fries. I don't do that. I say, no, I still want you to only have your one or two cheat meals a week because I don't want you to put on sloppy weight. Okay. I also don't want you to eat shitty food because even if you are skinny, I don't want you clogging your arteries. So I want to make sure that the weight that we put on is high quality weight. We're not just trying to put on weight for the sake of putting on weight. Okay. So I make tweaks, I make revisions on a weekly basis, sometimes a bi-weekly basis, sometimes on a daily basis, especially with my clients who are training for bodybuilding shows. But for the most part, I make weekly changes, revisions to people's plans based on the results. And it's not just the weight on the scale, it's also how they're looking, how they're feeling, how they're responding to the plan as a whole. Okay. But that's how I make those changes because I don't believe that just putting on any amount of weight is good, nor do I believe just taking off any amount of weight is good. Because the same thing can be said if you're on a weight loss program. If you start losing 5, 6 pounds a week, that tells me, oh shit, now we're losing fat, but we're also losing water and muscle. Well, I don't want to lose water and muscle. I just want to lose fat. So I need to start feeding this person a little bit more so we slow down the process. Okay. Because the quicker it comes off, the quicker it comes back on. Okay. So we want to be very careful. The quicker it comes on in the case of muscle, the faster it comes off. And I've seen that before, especially with guys and women who use anabolic steroids. They put on all this muscle, they come off their steroid cycle, they come relaxed on the diet, they relax on the train, they lose all that muscle. Okay. So you have to be strategic and you have to have a strategy that makes sense. And for that reason, my recommendation is to make weekly revisions or even bi-weekly revisions to your plan based on how you look, how you feel, and the number on the scale. All right. Okay, last question. Nick, at what age do you recommend people start lowering the weight they are lifting in the gym? I'm 65 years old and trying to decide if I should be lifting lighter now that I'm older. You don't want to just go into the gym and start training like a pansy because you're now older. Okay. And the reason I say this is because I have people on my roster who are in their late 60s who are still squatting 315, benching 225. No problems. Joints feel great. Tendons feel great. Ligaments feel great. Why would you take your foot off the gas if you've been training, in your case, your whole life, right? I assume because you've been lifting, you said in the gym you recommend people who lifting in the gym and lifting in the gym for the last 20 plus years. So why would you be going full force, take your foot off the gas because now you're 65? If you've been training for 20 plus years in the gym on a regular basis, I imagine that you're fairly fit. So why go in purposely and start lifting lighter? It doesn't make any sense. Still challenge yourself. If at 65 you can still bench press 225, then bench press 225. Okay. Now, If you're someone who's only been maybe training for a few years and you're 65, then yeah, you're probably going to notice that your threshold is not as strong for sure. In that case, you've got to really pay attention because you have more mileage on your body. And if you were fairly sedentary for the past 20 plus years, you most likely will have some form, in my experience, of arthritis, osteoarthritis, patellofemoral syndrome, potentially some plantar fasciitis, but some type of muscular injury, muscular imbalance because you've been sedentary. But if you're someone who's been active and fit your entire life and now you're in your 60s or your 70s, don't take the foot off the gas. Okay. Because it's almost like you're telling your body, oh, it's time to start giving up. And I honestly say this because I have quite a few clients who are in their late 60s, early 70s, who are still pushing more weight than some of my clients in their 20s. Okay. And there's no reason they should not be because A, they have muscle maturity, B, they've been training their entire lives. So they've got it there. They've got the strength, they've got the power, they've got the mobility, they had the flexibility. So why not do it? Their cardiovascular endurance is great, their resting heart rate's low, their blood pressure is fine, no problems with cholesterol. So keep going. Okay. So don't put limitations on yourself because of your age. Okay. Again, if you've been someone who's been fairly sedentary your whole life and you just started weight training in your 60s or 70s, then yeah, you have to be careful because you're dealing with some type of physical ailment, I'm sure at some point. And, you have more mileage on your body and you have to be careful because you did not build up that foundation in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, like a lot of the people that I'm referring to who are on my roster. So in that case, yes, you have to be careful. But I don't think anyone, regardless of your age, should go into the gym and think, oh, well, now I'm going to train lighter because I'm older. No, you should still be giving it your all. You should still be practicing proper form and technique and making sure that you're stimulating, not annihilating your muscles, but still challenging those muscles. Because otherwise, why not just give up? Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, July the 14th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at @fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house personal training business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and feedback that I receive from each and every one of you. Thank you all once again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.